Well, gang, it's Friday. So you know that Fridays are Masterclass days, and I'm glad you're joining me for this one because we are continuing our look at the figure. We had a little break there where there was some other things going on in the Adobe Live schedule, but we are back, and we're going to go pick up right where we left off and talk some turkey, or rather talk some people. Now, if you had joined me last time, we had left off with talking about basic proportions of the figure, as well as ensuring that when we draw the figure, we remember that the figure has to have weight and balance in order for it to appear believable, even if it's a very cartoony sort of figure. You're doing something that's really exaggerated, really silly in its proportions or whatever, you still have to remember that there should be a sense of weight and balance to that figure you draw so that it really is more convincing, right? All right. Now, if you want to go back and watch the other two episodes, they are archived on YouTube as well as on Behance. And you can just search for Illustration Masterclass with me, with Kyle, and then the word figure, and you should be able to find those two episodes. All right. Now today, what I wanted to talk about was after you've been doing some practice with maintaining the proper proportions with your figures, and I'll quickly just go over that one more time, little common mistakes that I see, and after all, that is sort of really the overall header that we have for this class, as we're talking about mistakes that I see very often. We started with things like mistakes seen when drawing the head, some common mistakes there, but also just general mistakes with proportions of the body. And one of those things, for example, was not making arms long enough, right? Giving people some stumpy arms, and remembering that if you just relax your arms and touch your fingers to your thigh, you will notice, holy cow, my hands go down farther than I realized. And that's an important thing to notice, right? So let us keep that in mind. So here I am just drawing that basic sort of armature that we had talked about. And I'm just going to put that right here. And there you go. There's where the fingers touch mid-thigh, right? I might have made them a little long there, but err on the side of longer than shorter if you want to be in good shape. And the same goes for legs. If you're going to exaggerate anything or stretch anything, and you want to get away with it and not get into too much trouble, well, you know, you really can't go too far off if you make the arms a tiny bit longer than they should be. And same goes for the legs. Okay, you make those legs a little longer, those arms a little longer. No one's really going to have any major issues with that. Okay, so just pop the wrists right there, and there's a hand, there's a thumb right there, and there's some fingers, boop, curling in that way. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is when you are drawing these figures in perspective, how can you keep them proportional, looking the right, making things stay in the right proportional relationships with one another. And that's something a lot of people struggle with, and rightfully so. It can be tricky. But I want to show you some little techniques you can use to help along with that, okay? All right, before I go any further, just check out how things are going in the chat and see who we have here today. Hi there, Cody. Nice to see you. And Jotermia, nice to see you as well. And Jotermia, I hope I'm saying your name right. Shame on me if I'm not. By the way, those of you watching on YouTube, don't forget, on YouTube, I am not seeing your comments. If you want to talk to me in the chat during the stream, please go to behance.net and make sure that you have a Behance account. Those are free. You just sign up. And then as soon as you have an account, you can come to the show at behance.net/live. It's an Adobe Live channel. And then you can put your questions in here, and I can answer them for you, and so on. Joe Termo says, I find proportions the hardest to nail with sketches. The hardest to nail with sketches. Well, you know, I think what I'm going to show you here might help you with that, and that is this idea of breaking things into sections, sort of placing the figure in a box, if you will. And then that box is also what we can use to place the figure into different environments in perspective, and keep things looking right. All right, so here's a general idea. I'm going to give myself a little horizon line here, okay? And then just give myself a little vanishing point. And let's say I want a figure to be about this tall in a scene, okay? And I want them to be facing, I'm gonna put another vanishing point here. They're gonna be facing out this way, okay? And I'll put another vanishing point here. And if you've ever learned how to draw in perspective, what you know is that you bring the edges of what you are drawing back to your vanishing point, right? So I'm just gonna do that quickly here. Now I don't have a ruler, so I'm gonna try and make this work. Helps if I zoom out sometimes to get that just right. There we go. And it's gonna be a little rough, but no worries about that. Okay. Now, what you wanna do is if you're drawing a box around your figure, okay, and I say, well, here's the top of the head, and maybe here's gonna be one of the feet, or this is the general height. Then I'm just going to give myself a little box within which to work. And this is a pretty extreme angle here. Okay, make that a little narrower on this side. This will be the front of the body here, and this will be the side. But what you'll notice is now I've got this box sitting here in perspective, right? And I'm going to come from the inside and use X-ray vision so I can go back out from this corner to the opposite vanishing point. Excuse me, I got to nail that as best I can, but it's going to get close. And then out to here as well. Okay. And then from the top on down to there. And then from this corner out to, oops, out to there. I'll try that again. There we go. All right, now just to sort of make that a little darker so you can see what's going on here, okay? There you go. So this box is meant to sort of contain my figure. All right, now I'm just drawing another layer here. I'm gonna knock this back a little bit in opacity. And in this layer underneath, I am going to draw with another color and show you that the general idea is that I've got my person here, and I'm gonna align everything to these vanishing points. Okay, so like the line of the shoulder is gonna be heading back to there. And then when I get to the hips, they're gonna be heading back there as well. And the knees are gonna be heading back there as well. Okay, ankles, etc. And that's the general idea. And then here's my bottom of my rib cage. Okay, so here is my figure. And they're just hanging out here in this box. And there's a little arm right there. Remember to make that long enough. There's another one back here. And now that we have this figure in the box, okay, and this is obviously not a full figure, this is just a very simple representation of, I'll give a little more definition to the skull shape there, of the human figure. But hopefully enough information here for it to make sense. Now I want to show you something cool that you can do. So at the halfway point of this box, already, I'll use another color for this just to make it extra clear. I can then draw a line and say, okay, here is my halfway point for the box, okay? And that's going to sit, you know, just underneath really where the hips are. It's going to be kind of like right at the bottom of the pelvis. All right, that's really where it should be. And then I can come about another quarter of the way down, and I should basically get to about where the knees are, more or less. And here, across the chest, right, across the breastbone right there, that is going to be another sort of a quarter for myself, and then on up to the head. So the idea is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. Now, why would I do this? Why would I separate things out like this and give myself these sections to work with, right? Anybody knows? Go ahead and throw the answer in the chat there. Here is the advantage of doing this. I can now, if I wish, place this box somewhere else in the picture plane, and I can turn it on its side, I could rotate it and so on, and I can then divide that box up into quarters, look at the halfway point and say, okay, I know that's roughly the pelvis or the base of the pelvis. Look at the first quarter and say, I know that's where the breastbone is right there, right, or the sternum, right? Really, it's kind of like a couple inches above the base of the rib cage, all right? And then the knees down to the feet, etc. And so what that's going to do is going to make it easier for me to draw another figure. So why don't we take a look at how that would work. So let's say I decide to have a figure lying down right about here, okay? And the first thing I want to do, or actually not, I'm not going to put that figure lying down there. I'm actually going to put another standing figure first because I want to show you what happens when we've actually established the height of this figure here with this line that's out in front, how we can actually take that line for the length of the general figure and use it in other parts of the composition. I'm just going to duplicate it here and drag it out. Oops, I'll draw it on a separate layer. 1 second. All right, here we go. There we go. All right, I'm going to just move that over here for a moment. Now, if I wanted to place another figure here, right, I can say, okay, use that same vanishing point if I want. And maybe I want to turn this person facing a little bit more towards me. I could actually change the vanishing point in that case, so I'll do that. I'll do this. And we'll slide this over this way. And I'll hide this little guy we drew at the beginning. Where's our little friend there? There we go. Just grab everything and slide it on over because I want to make room for another vanishing point for myself there. Okay. So I'm going to take my, whoops, slide everybody over again. Whoop, there you go. I'm going to take this horizon line, extend it out that way, and then pop another vanishing point right there. Okay, now I'm going to have this fella facing me a little bit more directly. But because I'm using the same horizon line and I know the height of my figure in this space, right, it's easy for me to then place another figure right here inside this box. And of course I can bisect that, and I know that's basically going to be where I wind up at the bottom of the pelvis. And then on down to the feet here. Give him a nice pair of trousers. Like that. All right, now what happens if I want to move a figure back in space? Well, let's hide that for a moment. Because I know this is going to be the height right here, right? I can just slide that over and I can resize it to fit within these lines I have going back to my vanishing point, right? These guidelines. And then I could put another figure back here. I'm not going to bother with the box just for now, but I want to just quickly throw somebody in there. Maybe they're standing and they've got their back to us, hands in their pocket. Like so. Now simply by using that trick, okay, of making sure that I've got everything lined up with that original line, that vertical line that I've established for the height of the figure that's here in the foreground, I would now be able to take all this and knock it back, and I just want to quickly draw those figures over again and show you how they will read as being correct in terms of the size relationships, okay? And here we have one character. There. And then we have our character back here. Maybe she's walking away from us. By the way, really common mistake when people draw folks walking is they'll have the arm and the leg going in the same direction. Everything goes opposite. So if your right arm is swinging back, your left leg should be swinging back. Okay, and vice versa. Make sure you don't make that mistake. I see all the time when people draw characters running, they'll flip-flop that accidentally. That looks bad. All right, now I'll just hide this group for a moment. And now if I establish our horizon line again, here in this drawing, all right, you'll be able to say, oh yeah, hey, that looks right, okay? And maybe I want to place another character, say, right here, okay? All I have to do is take the total height of our character. Remember that line we established there? And then I'm just going to come down to here and say, well, that's going to be my new vanishing point there. Or wherever you put your vanishing point, doesn't matter, but as long as it goes to this the same horizon line, I can put a character right there, okay? And see what I've done is I've taken the top and the bottom, total height of that, and drawn it back to the same horizon line, and then I can place a little figure right there, right? And so if you have multiple figures in your composition, this is how you sort them all out and make sure that they're roughly the right scale, okay? There you go. So hope that is making some sense. But now, what I was talking about earlier, what do you do when you want to put somebody in a box that we used at the beginning and change the position that they're in? You want to lie them down, you want to sit them down, or whatever. Well, the reason that we divide up the box into quarters is so that you can do that. So I'll just come over here. I'll move this stuff over and give myself a little space on my canvas. And let's try that over here on the right. So all you have to do is draw yourself a box, right? A rectangular box. So we'll do this, for example. We'll say, all right, got this box here. I'm going to draw it in a pretty extreme angle here. Foreshortening, right? Now I'm just eyeballing this. Okay, so if you want to set this up with your vanishing points and all that, by all means, go for it. This is just, I just want to do a quick demo of how this works. All right, there's the top of that box. And we've done a little bit of X-ray vision there. Now, the halfway point of that box, which is going to be, because of foreshortening, further up this way, not directly in the middle. I'm just going to estimate that. We know that that halfway point for me is going to be bottom of the pelvis. And then halfway between those two is going to be, when I say halfway, by the way, I'm still allotting more space as I move towards the bottom. So this should be longer than this, which should be longer than this, which should be longer than that. Okay, that's how it should work. Alrighty. So not terribly extreme foreshortening going on here, but there is some, so you gotta keep that in mind. But now that I've gone ahead and divided everything up, I can say, okay, so I know that up here I've got that skull, that head, right? And right at this point here is going to be that breastbone. So I can mark that off. Elbow coming right over here over the pelvis. And there's that pelvis falling in the middle of that box there. And then on down to the legs, knees. And we got feet right here on the inside of the box, right? So you see what happens with our foreshortening, how things get smaller and smaller on the way up inside that box until we wind up with a figure in there. Now I'll just knock all that back. And go ahead and draw in a better representation of what that would look like. An actual person was in there. Yeah. Remember to think in terms of, and I'm going to do this in just a moment here more clearly, but those simple primitives, I think we mentioned that in the first class, where I'm thinking about like tubes, basically building the body out of tubes more than anything, frankly, because legs, arms, etc. Right? 1 second. Looks like my MacBook is not plugged in again. Keeps getting unplugged. Because I have to keep switching stuff around. So bear with me. There we go. Yeah, so tubes, simple primitives are cubes, tubes, spheres, right? And don't forget those feet are like wedged shaped at the bottom there of the come across this way. Give myself a space for that other leg. And on down we go. See, I can line these up as well. Alrighty, so by dividing that long box as we do, helps me to break everything up, break it in half, break it into quarters, and sort of line things up that way. And that can be quite handy, right? So give that a try. If you want to go really nuts, try things like this. Try giving yourself top of the box like this, and then really go nuts, bringing these all these back to a vanishing point. See this? Oops. And try something really extreme like this, for example. And then challenge yourself to fit your figure inside that. And of course, I should be doing all these boxes much more narrow because the body is not as wide as it is tall. So that's just giving me, I'm making extra work for myself. I shouldn't be doing that. So let's correct that. Still going to the same vanishing point down here, but the beauty of working digitally, I can just erase stuff that isn't working out. There we go. Okay. So now in a situation like this, I'd be thinking about, okay, there's the head up top. And if you remember from the first day, I said, you know, when you're talking about the head, try to draw it more sort of like this shape like this, where it's kind of like an egg turned on its side with a face mask, you know, when you're drawing the head and drawing it from other angles, because just drawing a random sort of oval is not really all that helpful for you to get basically like the structure of the head. Okay, and that just it'll just help make a difference when you're drawing heads to be able to get them more accurate that way. Okay, that's too extreme right there, but you get the idea. Right, and from the back. There's that nice tube. The neck, remember it's at an angle connecting to the back of the skull, the underside of the skull there. Higher at the back of the head, lower where the jaw is. So you don't wind up with the old popsicle head problem we discussed in the first class, right? So that's, you don't want to deal with that. All right, anyway, back to this here. So working inside the box. Now, halfway down is about here. Keeping in mind that I've got to deal with foreshortening. And then halfway down from there is about there. And then halfway up here. Okay. So, move on down this way. And there's a lot of foreshortening going on here, so by the time we get to the pelvis, we're already done. Look at that, we're already done with that whole top of the body right there. And suddenly we're on top of the knees right there. And already we are at the feet right down there. Right, so that happened fast, right? Lots of foreshortening going on. Now to try and figure that out, if you're just getting started with this kind of stuff and not use some kind of measuring, could be pretty tricky. But placing it inside these boxes can help you out. And I hope that with some practice you can find that to be a useful trick for yourselves. So we'll just put a little body here. And there is our person with mostly what would appear to be accurate proportions for this kind of an extreme angle. Okay. go. Just hide that for a moment. And there, that's another character drawn, seen from a bird's eye view. If you're wondering what brush I'm using, by the way, this is the Vine charcoal brush that was released in that charcoal brush set, which you can get for Photoshop. Just tap on Get More Brushes right here. Get More Brushes, and you can find those brushes there. They also come preloaded in the free version of Adobe Fresco, which is great. So check those out. I'm going to pause for a moment, see if you have any questions. Let's see. It is oh, we got some more folks joining in. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Anaisa, nice to see you. So the question is, it's a bit hard for me to visualize sketches in 3 dimensions. Any tips on how we can practice that? I think the key to that is I would go back to, instead of trying to work on something as complex, complicated as the figure, you really need to start learning to sketch any kind of form in 3D, just from understanding these general rules of perspective. And it takes a while, but after you do a couple hundred drawings of just really simple shapes in 3D, so I would say, you know, stick with things that are things like tubes, you know, that are moving backwards and forwards in space. And when you can get more comfortable with drawing things like that, you'll start to be able to apply that thinking to more complex objects. And so the step beyond this, and so with simple primitives, whether it's pyramids or you know, whatever it happens to be, try doing as many cubes and pyramids as you can, and especially, you know, tubes are very important. But you know, if you draw things like this day in and day out with pyramids and you know, boxes of different lengths, always remembering that all parallel lines will converge in space a distance away from whatever you're drawing. You know, that's just how perspective works. But let me just quickly demonstrate again what we're talking about with the horizon line and vanishing points. And there are plenty of great tutorials and books on this, but just take an object in your house like a glass of water and set it on a table where it's close to your body and you're looking kind of down on it. Then push it about 4 feet away from you and put it farther away. And what you'll see is, like, when you're just right above the glass, you're going to get something approximating like an actual circle at the bottom of the glass and a almost circle at the top, you know? And that's what you're going to see, because that foreshortening is working this way where, you know, the closer that thing is to being directly underneath you, you're looking straight at the top of that glass being a circle, the closer that ellipse is going to approach to becoming a circle. And as you move further away, it's going to start to do this until eventually it flattens out at the horizon line, okay, which is that line between the sky and the ground, so to speak. But it's really just, if you're looking straight out, it's the line that lies up with your line of sight. That's how you're going to be arranging things at first when you're doing simple things in perspective. When you start getting into situations where For example, you might have a, I always go back to that Andrew Loomis drawing I saw years ago where there's like some figures on a balcony, and then we have a, I'll just draw this all the way out to completion here. Here's our vanishing point. And then there's a staircase leading up to this balcony. So you have like a person standing over here, chilling out at the balcony. And then you have people coming up the stairs. And well, if you're drawing like more than one person coming up the stairs, the issue winds up being like, how do you keep those people in perspective when you're no longer dealing with this vanishing point, because you're aiming downwards down the stairs. And so what he does is he creates a second vanishing point in the drawing that is beneath your line of sight. And so that winds up being like, say, here. And so then the figures who are coming up from there, so maybe some figure, maybe it's a figure standing here. This part's easy to do because I can just trace this back from the line of, from the feet. Here's the base of where that other figure is going to be. I can trace that back to the horizon line there, and then I can come forward like this on hit the top, the head of that person, like that. And I know I can get the height accurate for this person because they're standing on the same plane, right? They're just closer to me over here, and maybe they've just come up the stairs. I'm sure some other folks out there know this drawing I'm talking about. It's in I think it's in Figure Drawing for All It's Worth, the Andrew Loomis book. But then there are figures who are coming up the stairs, and so there's going to be a lower vanishing point. We should probably be a little lower here, like there. And so they give themselves another, like basically another horizon line, and then they take the height of this figure and trace it back to that one. And then, for example, if they want to have a figure who's like this far back, they'll pull that line over here and say, okay, there's the height of that other figure coming up the stairs. And then the feet will be basically right there. So I'll create a tangent there, which is not good, but so there's that other person coming up the stairs. Okay, so you had to create multiple vanishing points in your same drawing. But to do that with simple objects, such as, you know, cubes and whatnot, to start practicing exercises like that is really helpful. But I say again, like, keep it simple from on the outset, and really just practice first with a horizon line and a set of vanishing points. Just decide to pick any edge anywhere, trace it back to those vanishing points. I'm using this one here. And then decide how wide it is, and come back from the opposite one. So left corner goes back to right vanishing point, right corner goes back to left vanishing point, always moving in the opposite direction. Decide how deep that cube is, so it's this deep. Okay, now this, because it's the right side, is going to go back to that left vanishing point, right? And then this bottom left corner, because it's on the left, is going to go back to the right vanishing point. And wherever they intersect here, you can complete that cube. When you start to be able to visualize things like that, then you can randomly just start doing stuff like this, where you give yourself a four-sided object where you are assuming that the top and bottom and the left and right edges are parallel to one another respectively. So this edge here is going to be parallel to that edge there. This is parallel to that. And because they're not actually parallel, well, what we understand is if we continue to carry these out until eventually they cross, that's going to be where your vanishing point is. for that plane. And you can then decide how you want to treat the other side of the face, the other face of it, okay? And I could go really shallow like this, right? But once I have a vanishing point, I'm just going to throw a line in there. And wherever this goes back to, I keep tracing it out, right? Eventually it's going to intersect with that vanishing point, so that now gives me another place to connect here and give me that other face. And then just as like before, I'm going to trace this back. Right goes to left, right? Left goes to right. And that gives us the bottom. And eventually what you want to be able to do is do this without drawing the horizon line and the vanishing points, but just kind of eyeball it and see, you know, like what feels right to you. Knowing that no parallel edges should ever be truly parallel in the drawing if you're drawing it in perspective. They should not be. That just shouldn't be the case. So these should be more open. These should open out. These should open out, etc. And then you just kind of like fill your page with a bunch of these boxes, you know? And I know some people kind of like, they sort of mock this exercise, I think, and they say, this isn't worth it. But, you know, I disagree. I think it's just one of those things that you gotta do. That definitely is not a cube. That is like a trapezoid, what I just drew there, of some other kind, where the top is more narrow than the bottom. But that's fine. You can play with shapes like that too. Then you want to move to more complex things like cubes, cylinders, right? And that's going to be kind of a nuisance at first, but you're going to get the gist of that as well. You'll learn things like how to draw a circle inside of a square by using this trick where you divide it and you basically find the edges. And, you know, but eventually you start to draw ellipses that feel good. The secret to that is like keeping your hand moving. You don't slow down too much, you know. That one's kind of wonky. It's not very good. You want to kind of draw more from your shoulder. But you know, I still have to practice stuff all the time, and I'm like maybe 30% as good as I want to be with all this kind of stuff. It's a lifelong struggle, but you get better over time with practice. And one of the things, you know, you're talking about drawing the figure in 3 dimensions. I think one of the things that helps is that simple armature. So breaking it down to being like, okay, I've basically got this section of the body up top that is going to be a little wider at the shoulders. There's going to be a break at the bottom of the rib cage, so we have some flexibility there for what happens with the spinal cord, spinal column, I mean. And then I'm going to have this other tube, if you want it to be like a short tube. If that helps you to see the hips, that's fine. I think most people prefer to draw a box for the hips. So I can say, okay, there, got this box shape for the hips. All right, so I'm facing my hips in this direction. Chest is kind of facing out that way. I can do a nice little twist there, but the main goal here is to break things down into these simpler shapes like this. Okay. And then, after a while, I'll start to get more complex. But if you just want to sort of start by drawing figures this way, there's this great book. I know you don't have to be into comics to get this book. came out in the 70s, I think, called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. I was like 12 or 13 when I got that as a present one year from my parents. That was the first time I'd seen this idea of like breaking the figure up into basically tubes and spherical, like basic simple primitives, you know what I mean? And at first, I mean, it was definitely like, it took some getting used to understanding what I was looking at, but it does over time start to become more clear, like how that all is supposed to work. So I hope that's, I don't know if that's helpful. Vanessa, where are you, Vanessa? Hello. I don't know why you apologize for that comment. This is great, bringing together things I learned in art class. That's good. Right to left, left to right. Yeah, for when you're talking about. Oh, thanks, Cody, for posting that Marvel Comics link in there. I appreciate that. Yeah, left to right, right to left for that. Perspective, drawing things in perspective. When you have two vanishing points. Now, you know, really technically everything we're looking at in the world has three vanishing points if you want to be really telling the truth to everybody here. So, you know, what you're really looking at is maybe a vanishing point here, vanishing point here, vanishing point here, and like here's my picture plane, okay? And if I want to draw a cube, then I'm going to have to draw down to here and say, okay, there's my edge that's closest to the viewer. And that's coming down this way. And then I'm coming out that way, just to get that face. Oops. So the two faces that are opposite one another. Not opposite one another, sorry, adjacent to one another. And then however, depending on however wide that face is on this side or that side, you're gonna have to come down to that vanishing point, that third vanishing point. Right? We don't normally notice that things are quite this extreme because we're not looking up at the top of the skyscraper or down from the top of the skyscraper down over the earth. We're normally seeing things roughly at eye level, and so this third vanishing point doesn't really come into play in an obvious way, but it is good to keep in mind that that's kind of how we're seeing things in the world, okay? I mean, so that's a more extreme demonstration of what's happening, but you get the idea. And as I travel down this way, right, I'm going to wind up seeing more and more of the top of that shape, you know, if it were to start disappearing from me in that direction, downward. Okay, so that's what's happening there. So there's that top face, which I'm unable to see here because it is above the horizon line. I cannot see the top surface of that cube when it is above the horizon line, right? Okay, now back to the figure. So, got a few minutes left here. I want to talk about when you're visualizing the figure and working in 3 dimensions. You can do this you can break these things down into smaller divisions as well. And what I mean is something like a leg or an arm and a hand. So in the example where somebody is reaching right at you, you know, and their hand is right in your face, and you're like, well, how do I draw that? So this is helpful if you think about the divisions of the arm from the shoulder to the elbow, roughly halfway, you know? And so I can make myself a little division there. And I can trace all this back, if I want, to a vanishing point right there. And then I can trace it out to here, to these corners, right? And say, alrighty. So right about here is where I need to think about there being an elbow. And then right here is where I'm going to deal with that hand right in my face. Okay. So as I come back and thinking about that foreshortening, this is just helping me to work out those size relationships right there, right? So there's that hand spread out. I don't know, someone's yelling at me, hey, stop, dummy. That's a one-way street. Got the shoulder back there. So there's a lot of foreshortening happening here. And I can just knock that back. And if I do a little preparatory sort of exercise like that, you know, it could be helpful. In getting me to work this out. It's a terrible thumb. My apologies. Closer. Yeah, that hand is pretty bad, guys, but you know, I'll let it be. Move back this way. There's that shoulder. Okay, so you get the idea there. Now we're doing some really extreme foreshortening, but that could be helpful as well if you want to break things down like that, where you go from, instead of just drawing the arm and then kind of guessing your way through where to put those points of articulation, like the elbow and the wrist and so on. You can break that down further as well. Okay, so you're just working big to small, which is of course what we always want to do. Work big to small, big to small, big to small, big to small. That's the secret to success. Okay. And then we've got our, now that we know that this figure, once we've got that shoulder there, okay, we can turn all that and get everything else in proportion. And this is, of course, crazy foreshortening. This is, you know, very comic booky, exaggerated kind of a situation we've got going on here. But fun and possible if you use this little trick. All right. All right, slide that over here. Let's see. How do we draw a profile of a figure? Having trouble with that. Profile with a figure. Well, one thing to remember about the figure in profile is that the spine has this sort of rhythm of like an S curve, okay? It connects here to the base of the skull. Right? So you've got that nice S curve rhythm to remember, down to the sacrum there. And so that neck is connecting at an angle up to the head, lower again at the front of the neck, right? Higher at the base of the skull, back of the head. And then what you've got is that rib cage, don't forget, is connected to the back of the spine there. And you've got those ribs wrapping around front and coming all the way around and then up. So you've got this shape here popping out. And nice counter shape to this right here. And then you've got all this open space here, which is soft stuff, right? So you've got all your soft stuff in there. You got your guts and all that, right? And then right here, you've got pelvis basically is tilting back this way. So what you're going to get is this. You're going to go boom, 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 right? So you're getting these nice back and forth sort of zigzag kind of things happening. And then down we go and back again like that. So really it's just one C curve after another, which makes these S curves. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're trying to draw the figure. You can just kind of play that up at first, okay, until it feels better. Well, guys, I think I'm out of time, but I want to thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this. We'll pick this up again next time. We'll just keep talking about the figure. It's great when you post these questions in the chat and I can address them. And I'll try and come up with some more great tips and tricks for you, so hopefully that'll help you out. Everybody take care of yourselves, take care of each other, remember to be kind, and I will see you next time. Ciao for now.